On the good side, the Orioles finally looked like a consistent winning ball club over the weekend. On the bad side, they still were not able to come out with the series sweep. I'll break down the split two-game set against the Blue Jays coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Monday, April 14th, 2025, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the quick, rain-shortened two-game series between the Orioles and the Toronto Blue Jays this weekend, with the teams each coming up with one win before heading out. We'll give you the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles' 5-4 comeback win on Saturday, including their offense kind of picking things up, the home run ball returning and getting the big hit. Then we will also recap with the 5 things you need to know, the 7-6 extra innings loss on Sunday. Talking about the Orioles bullpen having kind of its first hiccup of the year, Gunnar Henderson getting going, and Cade Povich having another odd start. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So the Orioles are still without, somehow, a series win. It's been 5 series on the year, 2 splits, and 3 losses. As they split again over the weekend, it was a rain out postponement from Friday. They win it 5-4 Saturday. They looked like they had it in the bag on Sunday, a 6-3 lead in the 8th inning, but they lose 7-6 and they split the 2-game set with the Blue Jays. So we're going to recap the series. Let's start with Saturday. Orioles 5, Blue Jays 4, the final score in that one. I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from that Oriole win. And the first thing you need to know is Anthony Santander made kind of a perfect return to Oriole Park. Now, it was probably the worst weather game of the season so far after the cold and rainy night on Friday postponed that game. It wasn't exactly rainy, but it was certainly cold, miserable, wet. That led to, despite it being a 4:05 game with a giveaway, very small crowd. And the weather can do that to you sometimes in April. But Santander hitting third in the Blue Jay lineup, returning to Oriole Park for the first time after 8 seasons with the Orioles, and then signing that free agent contract with Toronto this offseason. It was a very cool ovation, even though it was a smaller crowd at Oriole Park on Saturday. People standing, giving applause to Santander. It was a cool scene. It was definitely a cool scene. It was something he absolutely deserved from this fan base. And then, of course, what did he do? He hit his first Blue Jay homer. Yeah, he hadn't homered yet. After 44 home runs with the Orioles last season, Santander had not left the yard yet this year until he got Tomoyuki Sugano. On the first pitch of the 3rd inning, Santander from the left side of the plate, a solo shot into the bleachers to put the Blue Jays up 3-0 at the time. We saw plenty of home runs directly to that spot from Santander over the last 8 years, so it was kind of cool to see it again. And the nice part was he only had one other hit on the weekend. It was his leadoff double in the 9th inning on Sunday. He was pinch run for, and the pinch runner, Nathan Lucas, was thrown out like a nincompoop on the bases for the first out of the inning. So Santander got his cheer, he got his home run, and that was really the only damage he did to the Orioles. And quite frankly, he helped the Orioles a little bit, kind of helped Gunnar Henderson on Sunday, which we'll talk about as well. So I would say a perfect homecoming for Santander. He'll be back for another series later this season, but little tear in your eye. You see him hugging the Orioles players, the Orioles staff. His moment with Brandon Quinones in the dugout before Saturday's game was cool. Just awesome to see Santander back in Baltimore. We're going to see him here plenty of times over the next 5 to 6 years with the Blue Jays. But the second thing you need to know from the Orioles Saturday win is that Adley Rutschman's 6th inning home run kind of ignited this Orioles offense, which was struggling to pull things together over the past few games. Down 3-2 in the 6th, Adley at the plate launching a solo home run in a deep right center field off of Blue Jay starter Balvin Francis to tie the game at 3. 108.8 miles per hour off the bat was the exit velocity, 426 feet. This home run traveled for the 5th longest home run of his career and the 3rd hardest hit home run of Adley's career since coming to the big leagues in 2022. And it was also his hardest hit ball of the year in general, and he pimped it, like straight up. It was awesome to see. Turned to the dugout, gave a yell, flipped the bat in the air. I mean, everybody in the ballpark in Washington home knew it was going off the bat to tie the game there. It seemed like it ignited the Orioles. Yes, they won the game. Yes, they didn't turn around and win the game the next day, but the offense looked good on Sunday. And it felt like that Adley swing really got things going after the O's were pretty quiet so far offensively in that game. Adley got them going, and he had 4 hard hit balls on the day on Saturday. He had a 105 mile per hour fly out, 105.1 mile per hour ground out, the homer, and then a 97.4 mile per hour line out later in the game. So only a 1 for 4 was certainly not rewarded with those hard hit balls, but the 10th game in Adley's career in which he's had 4 hard hit balls. Never had 5 in one game, but 10th time he's done it 4 times. And just the 3rd time in his entire big league career where he had 3 balls hit over 105 miles per hour for the exit velocity in one game. He was mashing the baseball, seeing it super, super well on Saturday. And it was good to see because even the good version of Adley never runs a super high hard hit rate. That's not how he produces on offense, but he had a 29% hard hit rate on the year coming into the game. I mean, that is super, super low. That is like 15th percentile in Major League Baseball. He's usually in the high 30s, like pushing towards Major League average. So that was a little concerning coming in, but nice to see him smash the baseball and definitely spark the crowd, spark the dugout. Like we are seeing right now, 2023 version of Adley. We are certainly not seeing the guy who slumped viciously down the stretch last year. He also had a double and an RBI in the game on Sunday as well. We are seeing the guy who squares up the ball, hits it on the barrel, doesn't strike out a lot, takes his pitches, has a good batter's eye, doesn't chase. That is the good Adley that we are seeing so far this year. Third thing you need to know from that Oriole win on Saturday is that Kjerstad and Mullins delivered the other big blows for the Oriole offense. Bowden Francis, who did he throw a no-hitter or he almost had 2 no-hitters last year? He took a couple of no-hitters into the 9th last season. Looked like he was trending that way. He had a perfect game going into the 5th until Cedric Mullins drew a walk with 1 out for the Orioles' first base runner. And then shortly after that, he hung a changeup to Heston Kjerstad, and Kjerstad pummeled it into the center field seats for a 2-run homer. His first homer of the year, the Orioles' first hit of the day, made it a 3-2 game. His hardest hit ball of the year at 105.5 off the bat. And it was a really good sign for Heston Kjerstad because coming into Saturday's game, and Masson kind of flashed this stat on the broadcast, Heston Kjerstad had the highest percentage of all of his fly balls this year going the other way, going to left field of all hitters in Major League Baseball. Basically, no other qualified hitter in the league so far early this season had hit a higher percentage of their fly balls to the opposite field than Heston Kjerstad. And that is not a good thing because for power hitters, the money comes from pulling fly balls. That's how you hit your homers. A lot of fly balls go to die when you hit them the other way. You don't hit them as hard. They don't fly as far. That's really been the issue for Kjerstad. So yeah, he didn't pull it, but to hit a ball to just slightly to the right side of dead center field and hit it in the air was greatly a good sign. And of course, the fact that it left the ballpark, got the Orioles a hit, got the Orioles a couple of runs was a good sign too. And then Mullins came up later in the inning because it was the Kjerstad homer in the 5th and the Adley homer in the 6th, but the Orioles were not done rallying. They ended up getting runners on 1st and 3rd with 2 outs for Cedric Mullins, and he came up huge. Fastball up and away on 3-2, ripped it into the left center field gap, went to the wall for a 2-run double. He ended up at 3rd. They said the left fielder bobbled it, so they called it a double and an error. I thought it could have been called a triple, but either way, drove in 2 runs to break the tie, put the Orioles up 5-3, and it continues to be just a fantastic season for Cedric Mullins, who after the game on Saturday was 2nd in the American League in RBIs. Number 1 was Aaron Judge with 20. Number 2 was Cedric Mullins with 16. Not the guy you expect to be sitting number 2 behind Aaron Judge, even at this point in the season, but he did it once again. And after Saturday's game, Mullins was 7 for 12 so far on the season with runners in scoring position, a situation where we know the Orioles really struggled down the stretch last year and led to their offensive roller coaster. But one player being 7 for 12, that is the 2nd most hits of any player in baseball this year with runners in scoring position. The leaders are tied at 8, and Cedric has 7. He has been clutch. He's hit the ball well altogether. I mean, really up and down. He's been the Orioles' best hitter so far in 2025. And in a platform here, a walk year from Mullins, it has been great to see. Now, the 4th thing you need to know from Saturday's game is that Tomoyuki Sugano was a little shaky in his Oriole Park debut. Sugano had made 2 starts already this year, He was solid in Toronto, but then was removed after 4 innings with the hand cramps. Then he was really, really good in Kansas City last weekend. He ended up leaving in the 6th, but he was really efficient. Looked like the Sugano the Orioles signed. He was not that. This first start at home for him was definitely the worst of his 3 so far in the major leagues. He started the game with back-to-back doubles by Bichette and Guerrero. The Blue Jays immediately had a 1-0 lead before Sugano even recorded an out. And he really was just struggling mightily to get clean innings. I mean, he gave up a run in the 2nd, gave up the home run to Santander in the 3rd. He walked 2 batters and didn't strike anyone out. Now, he had thrown only 73 pitches when he was pulled with 2 outs in the 5th, but clearly he just didn't have it. Like, he was getting hit very, very hard across the board. He threw all 6 of his pitches, but it felt like, the splitter was his most used pitch, but he couldn't really land it for a strike. He got a few swings and misses on the splitter, but you got to be able to drop it in the zone from time to time to get guys to chase it below the knees. And he only had 2 total swings and misses on 36 swings by Blue Jays hitters against him on Saturday. That is just not going to cut it as a starting pitcher. You cannot miss bats at that low of a rate and have sustained success. And we knew Sugano was not going to be a big-time strikeout pitcher coming in, but you got to at least miss a few more bats to have success. He did not do that. He was not fooling anyone. And the Orioles kind of saw it. He was getting hit hard. They had a super rested bullpen, right? Because they had the off day Thursday that was scheduled, and then they had the off day Friday because of the rain out. So everybody in the pen was ready to go. So even though he had only thrown 73 pitches, it wasn't going well. There were 2 outs in the 5th. Brandon Hyde knew, hey, I can go to the bullpen and have plenty of guys to finish off this game. And that is what he did. And it certainly did work out for the Orioles, because the 5th and final thing you need to know from this Orioles 5-4 win over the Blue Jays on Saturday is that Brandon Hyde deployed his rested bullpen very, very well in this game. It wasn't just the off days Thursday and Friday. There was also the upcoming off day here on Monday. So Hyde knew, hey, even if I throw all my relievers on Saturday, I can throw most of them again on Sunday. They can all have off Monday and most be ready again on Tuesday when the Guardians come to town. So Hyde was in a good spot where if he felt he had to pull his starter early to keep the O's in the game, he could. And that is what he did with Sugano, and it worked out almost perfectly. I mean, Aiken came in the 5th, got the final out of the inning to keep it at a 3-0 game. Then Kjerstad hit the homer. And then Brian Baker did allow his first walk and his first earned run of the year in the 6th and 7th. But Yennier Cano got out of a jam in the 7th. Gregory Soto was absolutely nasty in the 8th to keep the Oriole lead. And then they were able to turn things over to Felix Bautista for his first save chance of the season. Honestly, kind of wild that it took until the 14th game of the year for not just Bautista, but for the Orioles in general to have a save chance. They were the only team in baseball left who hadn't got a chance at a save, and also the second ever Orioles team to go without a save chance in their first 13 games of a season. The other Orioles team, I'm going to give you a second. What is the other Orioles team to go their first 13 games without a save chance? When you hear it, it's going to make a lot of sense. Yeah. It is the 1988 Orioles, who famously started the year 0-21. Their first save chance was in game 22, the game they finally won. So yeah, it makes sense that a team that lost 21 in a row to begin the year might have 13 straight games without a save chance. And that was the only other Orioles team who's been in this spot. Some of it's because they've been playing poorly at times. Other of it is because when they've won games, they pulled away in those games. They haven't been up by 3 or less heading into the 9th inning. When Felix has pitched, the O's have had 4 and 5 run leads when he's come in there, but this was the test. It was a 1-run lead, 5-4 to the top of the 9th. Only his 4th outing of the year. First save chance in almost 600 days. And I was a little nervous for him. I'm not going to lie. And he walked 2 batters. He allowed the lineup to flip over to the top spot with Bo Bichette, who has just murdered the Orioles in his career and did it this weekend as well in the 2 games, did it in the first weekend of the year in Toronto. And you're getting a little nervous. And then what does Felix do? He strikes out Bo Bichette up by 1 with the game very on the line, 2 on and 2 outs. And he gets him with a slider. A pitch that has always been the number 3 offering. Felix has always been sinker splitter, 2 of the best pitches in baseball. And then he'll drop that slider in every once in a while just to keep guys on their toes. But to get a strikeout with a slider is very surprising for Felix Bautista. And he got it to end the game. Coming into play on Saturday, Felix only had 6 career strikeouts with his slider. This is a guy who has been in the big league since the beginning of the 2022 season. Now, of course, he didn't pitch at all in 2024 after Tommy John surgery, but he went 2+ seasons with only 6 Ks on one of his pitches for a guy that strikes out a lot of hitters, like one of the best strikeout relievers in baseball. And here's the other thing. His last strikeout with a slider before Saturday was in May of 2022. So all 6 of those slider strikeouts came in the first 2 months of the 2022 season while he was like a middle reliever to setup guy with the Orioles. Like he had not even become the closer yet. It was still Jorge Lopez's job at that point before he was traded later in that season. So he hasn't even done this since he took over the closer role. The only other time he ended a game with a strikeout via a slider was a game in St. Louis back in May of 2022. Jorge Lopez was not available, so Felix Bautista got the save chance, and he struck out Tyler O'Neill with a slider to end the game and pick up the save. That is the only other time he's done it. And so you think about, Bo Bichette does sometimes chase out of the zone, and, his fastball velo, Batista's was a little bit down. He did not have splitter command at all on Saturday, so him and Adley said, you know what? Let's go to the slider he might never expect, and I'll tell you what, Bo Bichette did not expect it. Swinging through it, we got an Adley-Felix hug after a save at Camden Yards for the first time in a long time. It had been almost 600 days since his last save, and that was just, yes, the velo was down. Yes, he didn't look as nasty, but that was just awesome to see to end that Saturday game. And then the Orioles turned it over to Sunday, and they played good baseball again. It looked like they were headed for a series sweep to kind of turn this season around. And then disaster struck late, and the Orioles lost in extras. We'll tell you how it happened on Sunday coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you keep full longer. Personally, I'm a big fan of the classic variety, cracking open the shells and getting a delicious pistachio, but many people love the no shells variety as well. It's the perfect grab-and-go snack for busy days. They also have amazing flavors as well. But for me, again, that satisfying crack of opening each shell, it is like snack meditation. So get snacking and get cracking with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. So after the big comeback win on Saturday, that was the other thing. The Orioles didn't have a lot of comeback wins in the second half last year, didn't have a lot of them so far this year. You're trailing 3-0 in the fifth. You come back and win that game 5-4. It was all good vibes for the Orioles after the W. And they played mostly pretty good baseball on Sunday. It looked like they were headed to a quick 2-game sweep over the Blue Jays to get this whole big thing back on track. And then it didn't happen. And they lost 7-6 in 10 innings to split the 2-game series, meaning they've gone 5 series without a series win, and they are now a not-so-nice 6-9 on the season in their first 15 games. And I'll get you the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles' Sunday loss. And the first thing you need to know is, well, at least the Orioles' right-handed hitters must be loving that new wall out there in left field, because they got 2 more home runs on Sunday after getting 2 on Saturday, and both were hit by lefties to a place where the new wall probably would have kept them to extra base hits or even outs in 2024. First, it was Ryan Mountcastle, a solo shot in the second inning for his first home run of the year off of Jose Barrios, line day breaking ball over that new moved in left field wall. The first Oriole this year, again, it's just the 5th home game they've played, but first Oriole this year to hit it over the new wall in left field. It absolutely would not have been a home run last year, but also StatCast said it would be a home run in all 30 major league ballparks this year. So that is how kind of out of the box the old big wall was for the past 3 years. And Mountcastle also had a hard hit single into left field later in Sunday's game. And again, with both of those hits coming to the pool side, like that is a really good sign for Mountcastle, who we talked about was just not pulling the ball enough last year. He's doing it more this year, and great to see him get his first home run on the board. It has to feel better for him than anyone else, who lost more homers than anyone to that left field wall that was Mount Baltimore for the past 3 seasons. And then Tyler O'Neill hit also his first home run with the Orioles. His only other homer was on opening day for the O's to keep his streak of 6 straight opening day homers. Well, he got his second home run with Baltimore, hit it into left field, mashed it out there. It was dropped by Mr. Splash. But honestly, that one even you looked at, you're like, I don't think that would have been a home run at the old wall for the past 3 seasons. But both of O'Neill's home runs are off Jose Barrios, so he's certainly got a pitcher he likes facing. And just good to see the righties do that. And good to see the Orioles hit the home run ball, right? They got the 2 homers from Kjerstad and Rutschman on Saturday. They get 2 more of them on Sunday from Mountcastle and O'Neill. And that's been a tale of the Orioles season. They had 10 homers in their first 3 games of the year when they were 2-1 against the Blue Jays. Then just 2 home runs in their next 10 games. And then they turned it around, 4 more homers in the last 2 games. The Orioles have 16 home runs this year. 14 of them have come against the Toronto Blue Jays. So I'm kind of sad they won't see the Blue Jays again for a little while. That has been the team and the pitching staff, at least the opposing pitching staff, that has allowed this Orioles team to hit the ball out of the ballpark. Couldn't do it quite enough this weekend to get a sweep, but maybe that will propel them into doing it a little bit more as this season rolls on. Now, the second thing you need to know from Sunday's loss is that Gunnar Henderson had his biggest day of the year so far. Gunnar's only been healthy for a little more than a week, coming off the IL where he started the year with that mild intercostal strain, and he still has not homered, but he did put up 2 singles and a triple on Sunday, putting together a 3-for-5 day with a couple of hard hit balls. The triple was helped a little bit by some rough play in right field from Anthony Santander. It certainly was not a banner weekend defensively from the Blue Jays as a whole. They definitely gifted the Orioles some runs this weekend with some bad defense. I mean, Vlad Guerrero, $500 million for the worst defensive third or first baseman you've ever seen, gifted the Orioles 2 runs on an error late in Sunday's game as well, dropped 2 balls at first base on Saturday. But Gunnar Henderson came into this game, and this kind of continued with the 2 hard hit balls on Sunday, with a 71% hard hit rate. That is absurd. I talked about this last week. Aaron Judge led baseball last year at 61%. Gunnar, very small sample size, 71% coming into Sunday. That is a crazy hard hit rate. Now, you might be asking, Connor, you talked about last week how a hard hit ball last year had a .490 batting average. How's Gunnar Henderson have a 71% hard hit rate and was coming in hitting under 200? Well, he was hitting the ball on the ground too much. And that was something we talked about. The Orioles just have been doing too much of that this year. That's why they've grounded into so many double plays. But he had a super high 59% ground ball rate. That is way, way too high for a guy like Gunnar Henderson. But finally, hit the ball in the air for that triple in the third. The Orioles kind of fixed their ground ball problem this weekend, right? They hit the ball in the air more and more, got the ball out of the ballpark. That is a good sign moving forward, and obviously a good sign for Gunnar. He's smashing the baseball. That home run is coming sooner rather than later. I'm going to guarantee Gunnar Henderson in the rest of this homestand, the final 6 games, hits his first home run of the year. Third thing you need to know from Sunday's extra inning loss is that Cade Povich had kind of a similar start to his last one. He had that weird and wild start in Kansas City last weekend where he gave up 4 runs, but only 1 earned over 6 innings, and he gave up 12 hits, but still lasted 6 innings and kept the Orioles in the game. One of the weirder stat lines you will ever see is what Povich put up on Sunday, and it wasn't nearly as weird this Sunday, but still a little bit odd from Cade Povich. Final line, 4 2/3, 2 runs on 7 hits, 2 Ks, a walk, and a home run on 76 pitches for the young left-hander. He certainly kept the Orioles in the game, only allowing 2 runs to the Blue Jays in this one. Got some help from some double plays, especially in the 3rd and 4th innings, but you know, he scattered hits again, right? He allowed 7 of them, but he scattered them. He didn't really miss any bats, only 4 whiffs on 32 swings. That's becoming a theme for this Orioles rotation. Also, Toronto had 16 hits on Sunday. 9 of their 16 hits came with 2 strikes. The Orioles starters, relievers just had issues putting the Blue Jays away, getting the big strikeout in Sunday's game. That was kind of their demise in the 7-6 loss, and it hurt Cade Povich with only the 2 Ks, but he walked in this game. He went up there. He walked only 1 batter. The only home run he gave up was a solo shot to Alejandro Kirk. That combination allows you to scatter 7 hits if you're not walking guys. And when you give up the homers, there's nobody on base. That allows you to still keep your team in a game despite 7 hits and 4 2/3 innings and not having your best up. I mean, he did throw some really good changeups at times in this game. I thought he struggled with the fastball command to get it up when he wanted to. There were a couple of hits that Povich allowed it was, I believe, in the third inning when he gave up a run when he had 2 strikes on Bichette and Vladdy, and he tried to throw high fastballs, and both of them just ended up like on the inner third, but in the middle of the plate, and they both singled on them. That led to the run that the Blue Jays scored in that inning. Throwing his fastball up is where Cade Povich needs to be. He's got incredible induced vertical break on his four-seam fastball. What that means is it has that kind of faux rising action on it where it almost looks like it rises to a hitter. So even though he throws 91 and 93, it plays up when he throws it up in the zone. When you throw down in the zone, that rising effect doesn't really work. But when you throw up in the zone, that's where it gets hitters. And he did some up in the zone fastballs in this game, but not nearly enough. And when he left the fastball down, that's really when he's gotten hurt each of the last 2 weeks. If he can command that fastball better up in the zone, that is when he will get back to the pitcher we saw just dominate last September, but just couldn't make those good 2-strike pitches with the fastball when he needed to. Now, the fourth thing you need to know from this Sunday loss is that the Orioles bullpen really did have its first bad day of the year. Now, the O's coming into Sunday had a 3.24 bullpen ERA. That was 6th best in Major League Baseball. It's something I talked about being a strength of this team. And I've also talked about how bad Cionel Perez has been this year. If you take out Cionel Perez's stats, the Orioles have a 1.80 bullpen ERA this year, which would be second in MLB. Their bullpen coming into Sunday had given up 18 earned runs. Half of those, 9 of them, had been given up by one single pitcher, Cionel Perez, who's only thrown 5 innings this year. So they've been really good, especially the A bullpen. But this is only the second time this season that the bullpen has allowed at least 4 earned runs. And the only other time they did it was when Cionel Perez by himself allowed 5 earned runs in 1 inning in the bottom of the 8th in Kansas City last week, which turned a 3-2 Royals lead into an 8-2 Royals lead heading into the 9th. So that one doesn't even count to me because it was all Cionel Perez in 1 inning. The bullpen had been scoreless before Perez did that. And the only other time the Orioles bullpen had allowed 4 runs in a game, that was the second game of the year in Toronto. They allowed 3 earned runs, 4 runs total. 2 of them were given up by Perez, and the 2 others were given up by Albert Suarez, who was pitching with a shoulder injury and went on the injured list the next day and is now on the 60-day IL and is going to miss multiple months. So really, the Orioles bullpen has not had a day as a whole nearly this bad until Sunday. It's been, I mean, you can't even argue this. The bullpen has been, at least through 14 games, by far the biggest strength of this Oriole team. It had been, to me, no doubt, a top 5 bullpen, one of the best bullpens in the major leagues. Just at some point, you're going to have a bad day. That happens to every single bullpen, know how good it is. And that is kind of what happened to the Orioles on Sunday. Now, Brian Baker got a good strikeout. I can't believe John Schneider left George Springer in the game after he clearly hurt himself on a swing and miss. They came out and looked at him. They left him in. Baker struck him out, and Springer ran immediately into the clubhouse. Just terrible for your player right there. He was clearly injured, and they let him stay in the game. I could not believe that, but Baker got a big out in the 5th. But it all started with Keegan Aiken. He came out in the 6th. He got the first 2 batters, and then he had 7, 8, 9 due up, and he allowed double RBI single and walked 7, 8, 9. Just didn't help out the O's. Now, they were able to get out of the jam. Sir Anthony Dominguez came in and got a big strikeout to keep the Orioles up 4-3, but that just got the bullpen out of whack. And then Dominguez was good in the 7th, and the O's had a 6-3 lead. And then Gregory Soto, he had been nails this season. Just had his first bad outing, allowed 3 earned runs in the 8th for the Blue Jays to be able to come back and tie the game at 6. Yennier Cano came in, made a bad 0-2 pitch to Bo Bichette, who singled with 2 strikes and 2 outs on an 0-2 pitch to tie the game. Bo Bichette, the king of the 2-strike hit, I should say. And then, Cano did a good job putting up a 0 in the 9th, and Matt Bowman, he gives up the unearned run to the zombie runner to score in the top of the 10th. You're kind of in a tough spot having to use Matt Bowman, who's been good, but in low leverage this year in the top of the 10th inning. But his run came on a dribbler up the third baseline. Like, he even pitched well in the 10th, just got a little unlucky. And they did ask for more from this bullpen on Sunday, which I was fine with. They pulled Sugano in the 5th Saturday at 73 pitches. They pulled Povich in the 5th with 2 outs with 76 pitches on Sunday. And it makes sense. Again, off days Thursday and Friday, and an off day coming up here on Monday. You can use most of your relievers Saturday and Sunday, back-to-back days. They're off Monday. They're pretty much all good again to throw on Tuesday. So it's a spot you're rarely going to be in with 2 games sandwiched in between 3 off days. That is never going to happen except for maybe around the All-Star break. So the O's tried to shove it because their starting rotation has been so bad. You got to take advantage of it and say, all right, we are going to go with instead our bullpen because this rotation has been so bad and the bullpen has been so good. It just backfired. Like, I honestly would have taken Povich out of the game sooner on Sunday. They allowed him to face Vladdy and Santander, and luckily it didn't hurt him. But I thought they were going to take him out with one out in that fifth inning. They did not. And they just, they didn't have Felix because they're not going to use Felix on back-to-backs. And you can't plan for extra innings. I know some people are probably upset, like, oh, how can you get into a spot where Matt Bowman pitches in the 10th? Why would you do that to yourself? Well, you can't plan for extra innings. You can't save good relievers for extra innings, especially when you're winning late. You're managing to win the game in 9 innings. Unfortunately, Soto had a bad outing, and it just set the Orioles up poorly, and then they didn't score with the zombie runner in the 10th. They could have at least extended that game. They were only down 1 and did not do it to extend the game, and it put you in a tough spot late with Matt Bowman out there in the 10th, although he didn't pitch that poorly. Just the first rough day for the A bullpen for the Orioles. And the fifth and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 7-6 loss in extra innings to the Blue Jays on Sunday is that you just got a shout out to Robinson Chirinos. Managed his first, but not full game, but most of a game. Brandon Hyde, who was ejected early in this one when the home plate umpire John Bacon decided the strike zone went down to the shins of Oriole hitters, and Hyde let him hear it. And Bacon, who looks like the third character in Beavis and Butthead, threw him out of the game in the 3rd or 4th inning. And Chirinos came in to manage the rest of the game. Former Oriole, who was hired this year in his first big league coaching gig as Brandon Hyde's bench coach on this staff, got promoted to manager for the day with Hyde getting ejected. And he was in there using his staff to help him out, made some challenges. Just cool for Robinson Chirinos, who is definitely going to be a big league manager one day. A cool moment for him to get to take over. Unfortunately, Gregory Soto didn't help him out to get a win there. And the Orioles dropped the game 7-6 in extras. I mean, they played good baseball. Like, they looked like a good baseball team for all of Saturday and Sunday's games. It's not something you could say for the Orioles. Even they still haven't won back-to-back games this year. I mean, that's what happens when a team is 6-9. You're rarely going to win back-to-back games. But these are the best 2 back-to-back games felt like they played this year, where they won Saturday and they absolutely should have won on Sunday. And the offense looked way, way better. The bullpen was still good, except for at the end, and the starting pitching was not good, but kept them in both games. And you can't say that about all the starts they've gotten this year. So baby steps forward, despite not winning the series. Baby steps forward for the Orioles. Got a little bit more to get to in the final segment. Just some quick injury news and notes to finish off the show coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Well, between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it is easy to lose track. That is where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Now, when you start using Monarch, you can realize just like how much you're spending on things like food delivery. Now you budget smarter and you can save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. So just a few pieces of injury news and notes to get to before we finish off this Monday episode. Orioles, of course, had the rain out on Friday. That was supposed to be my first game of the year, but weather was disgusting. Didn't make it to another game this weekend. It was rescheduled for a doubleheader on Tuesday, July 29th, when the Blue Jays are back in town. Now, many wondered, why wouldn't you just play a doubleheader this weekend? Well, I think they were a little scared there'd be more rain in the area on Saturday that would screw with the doubleheader, and the Blue Jays had to get back to Toronto. They're playing a home game tonight, so you don't really want to play a doubleheader on a Sunday getaway day. When you have this much season left, teams will generally avoid the early doubleheader, although the Orioles could have managed a doubleheader right now with all the off days. The Blue Jays probably wouldn't have wanted that so much, and they will travel back home after the Sunday game, and the O's will play them on a doubleheader in July. So that meant the Orioles didn't have to make some sort of choice for Sunday start. Now, they didn't absolutely need a spot starter Sunday if they would have played Friday's game, because Charlie Morton would have been pitching on regular rest. He started Tuesday. He could have started on Sunday again and just skipped Zach Eflin, who, of course, was placed on the injured list with that small lat issue this week. But we talked about how, hey, if you started Morton on Sunday, you would lose the ability for all these guys to get extra rest. Well, little lucky for the O's that they didn't play Friday. Now everybody can get the extra rest anyway. They moved everybody back, Sugano and Povich, to Saturday, Sunday, off day Monday, and Morton will start on Tuesday. However, you will still need a starting pitcher. Even with the off day Friday, they still need a starting pitcher this Saturday, April 19th, against the Reds. That is when they won't be able to skip Eflin unless they put somebody on short rest, and they're not going to do that. So they're going to have to call up somebody from AAA, and Brandon Hyde said on Saturday, Kyle Gibson is not going to be ready by then. He made his first AAA start on Thursday as he is building up after being a late signing by the O's to a one-year deal right before opening day, but he's just not going to be ready yet, Hyde said, which seemed like the case. It's going to be closer to May 1st that Gibson is good to go for this rotation. So it seems like Brandon Young will make his major league debut, added to the 40-man roster this offseason, has made 3 pretty solid starts in AAA, 2 good ones to begin the year. Then he started on Saturday in AAA, which means he would be on regular AAA rest to start again next Saturday. And it's a game against the Reds. They've been one of the worst offenses in baseball this year. He did give up 5 runs in 5 innings, but it was 6 Ks, no walks, a lot of bad luck in that start Saturday for Brandon Young. The stuff looks good. He's throwing strikes. If it's just going to be one spot start on Saturday against the Reds, I am absolutely fine giving it to Brandon Young. I think he's deserved it, and the O's can at least get an early look at him. Since he is already on the 40-man roster, it'd be good to call him up. But if they don't want to go with Young, Cody Poteet, really the only other legit option on the 40-man in AAA. He's been pitching kind of long relief, mostly 2-inning bursts in AAA since the Orioles got him from the Cubs. So I don't know how built up he would be. It just seems like it's almost got to be Brandon Young who starts that game on Saturday. Now, Kyle Bradish, we got some good news through his first bullpen session on Saturday, coming back from the Tommy John surgery he got last June. We still don't have a full timeline. We don't know. It's still TBD when and if the Orioles will get Bradish back on the mound in the big leagues here in the 2025 season. Seems like the earliest would be July or August, and it'll probably be beyond that. But a good further step to throw a bullpen. Andrew Kittredge also threw a bullpen session on Saturday, his first since that knee cleanup surgery he had in March that said it would take him out for a few months. Brandon Hyde did say that Kittredge is right now ahead of schedule coming back from that injury, would be another good veteran reliever to add to this bullpen, but still no timetable on him coming back. And then Grayson Rodriguez, who's been throwing bullpens, through another one on Saturday as well, but just at this point, no timeline for his rehab assignment ending and him getting back on the mound. And the last thing injury-wise I wanted to talk about is Jeff Hoffman. Obviously was a main character in Sunday's game, scoreless bottom of the 9th. Jays get a run in the 10th, keeps the Orioles scoreless in the bottom of the 10th to get the win, and the Blue Jays win it 7-6. Kind of did the Felix Bautista, got the big strikeouts with the zombie runner in the 10th inning. And Hoffman's been a character because there were reports that were confirmed this offseason that the Orioles had initially agreed to a 3-year, $40 million deal with Jeff Hoffman this offseason. Then they did his physicals and saw something in his shoulder they didn't like, and he ended up not signing with the O's. He signed for less money for 3 years with the Blue Jays. Now, a lot of people are saying, oh, the shoulder looks fine. Orioles should have signed him. I think the Orioles still should have signed him, but I want to set the record straight. A lot of people are talking like the Orioles offered him 3 years, 40, did the physical, saw the shoulder, and then took all the money off the board and said goodbye. That is not what happened. They offered him 3 years, 40. They saw the shoulder, didn't like it, and they offered him just a lesser deal. We're unsure if it was less money, less years, or both, but they still offered him a contract. He declined that to take a deal with the Blue Jays for 3 years, 33, but he still had to take less money than the 3 years, $40 million that the Orioles were offering him. And it also came out that before the Orioles failed his physical, the Braves had an agreement to sign Jeff Hoffman. The Braves saw his physical, and the Braves didn't like what they saw on his shoulder, and they moved him on to the next stop. The other thing is, the Orioles very clearly were signing Jeff Hoffman to use him as a starting pitcher at some point. He used to be a starter with the Rockies before the Phillies turned him into a great reliever the last couple of years. But there were reports that Hoffman was looking to potentially be signed to be back as a starting pitcher again this offseason. If the Orioles were giving someone a 3-year deal for $40 million, it's clear they were going to use him as a starter. What I am not certain, but I think was going to happen is the O's were going to sign him. They were going to use him as a reliever in 2025, and that was shown because when they didn't sign Hoffman, they immediately signed Andrew Kittredge. And then they were going to build him up as a starter next offseason. He would be a starting pitcher in 2026 and 2027 in that deal. But if they saw something in the medicals in the shoulder, didn't tell them, hey, he's going to get injured immediately, probably told them this shoulder doesn't look like it's going to hold up to a starter's 150 inning workload over 2 years, even if we use him only as a reliever this year. I'm sure the Orioles still thought he would be a good reliever, which is why they still offered him a deal just for a little bit less money and thought, okay, maybe he'll only be a reliever because of the shoulder, but he'll still be a good reliever and we'll still offer him money for that. So I just want to clear that up because it feels like people are saying, oh, they saw the shoulder and said, nope, you're done. You're going to be terrible forever, injured forever. No. The Orioles probably thought he can still be a good reliever. He's got great stuff, just thought he couldn't hold up long-term as a starter, which is most likely what they wanted him to be at the end of this deal. And so that is why they amended and still offered him a contract. Now, Jeff Hoffman has all the right in the world to be pissed at the Orioles, pissed at the Braves, and get excited when he strikes him out and gets a save. Like, absolutely go for it. But as Orioles fans, let's set the record straight on what exactly happened in that situation. Now, would I love the Orioles to have Jeff Hoffman right now? Absolutely, I would. But I understand if they're seeing something in the shoulder and they're just offering a little lesser money because they don't see him being a starter moving forward. Now, if the Blue Jays turn Hoffman into a starter next year and he stays healthy, that is, of course, a different conversation. But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Orioles off here again on Monday, but unless some things seriously change, looks like we will still have a Tuesday episode coming up for you. Might dive deeper into the numbers once again on the pitching side. And then we continue on as the Orioles get back into action on Tuesday. But back with a Tuesday episode. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.